Modulo Chapter 9 is officially here, so let's just get right into it. So the chapter starts off with a Juju stroll, and then we get to the actual first page, and we get a little bit of an explanation as to what the third eye is. It says, the third eye is an essential organ for every living being on Sumeria, and it is the source of their Rololuka. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but we get a little text blurb that tells us that Rololuka is just how they say cursed energy. Then it says, however, the Rumelians are the only ones who shed a tear from it when a Kalian dies, and the only time other Sumerians shed a tear from it is when they are born or when they die. And the shedding of tears from this eye can take such a toll on the brain that it could even be fatal. And the chapter starts off where the last one ended, where they were like celebrating that the canal was finished, and then somebody comes bearing some bad news that the Discante chief's daughter was killed by a Kalian. Now the Discante chief is demanding 90% of the Rumelians' territory in exchange since his daughter's life was taken. And if they don't cooperate, he's going to attack in retaliation. Then one of the elders says, we're already hearing rumblings that they're going to challenge us to a duel. Then we get a text page that tells us the Discante do not usually go to war, they settle their differences by these things called duels. So essentially, if there's a disagreement or something happens and they're trying to decide who's right, they have a one-on-one battle between their two strongest warriors, and whoever wins is deemed to be correct in the situation. And the people are talking and reminiscing on the last time there was a duel. They say before their village was destroyed, the Discante held a fighting tournament, and our guy Dura right here was the winner. Cross is kind of tripping by this because he's like, can't we just refuse the duel? And everybody's like, no, the Discante will be even more ruthless if we try to refuse this, so it's something we have to do. We then get a panel of Dura, and he's kind of hitting the, I guess I'll fight in the duel, you guys, and it reminds me so much of this Gojo panel right here. Then it skips forward, and it says the day of the duel has finally arrived, and it says the outcome was clear the second the Rumelians laid eyes on the Discante warrior. And of course, many of you probably already guessed it, the warrior that Dura is going to be fighting is Dabura. Cross is tripping, he says, let's just run away, like, let's get out of here. Dura is then in the ring and he's walking towards Dabura and he says, Dabura, it's been a long time. How's your little sister? And Dabura is trying not to make eye contact. He's looking down like, they took my sister hostage. Then Dabura confides in Dura and he says, I don't know what to do. They told me I had to fight you to the death. And Dura says, it's fine, don't worry about it. The outcome isn't what's important. I do have a request for you though. We get a panel that shows them talking, but it doesn't tell us what they say yet. It ends with Dabura saying, alright. Then Dura announces out loud and he says, let me speak for a little while longer, kind of talking to like everybody there. He begins this little speech by saying, there are more tribes than just the Discante and the Rumelian. And he says, I admit there's been a wall between the Rumelians and the rest of you because of the Kalian religion. He adds in, what caused the exile of the Rumelian people 10 years ago was not due to some religious war because of the Kalians, it was actually because of an invasion by the Discante to the quarry of Mol. Then it tells us Mol is a special element that can convert the Rololuka or their cursed energy into other forms of energy. Or actually, all forms of energy. Then he says, I'm not trying to make a big deal over this after so long, but if a war starts over economic ambitions, but gets framed as a religious war instead, other tribes will be reluctant to send aid to help. Then saying, but religion is supposed to be rooted into everyday life, and not be some grand cultural ideology. We weren't asking you to respect our religion, but our way of life from which it grew from. He ends it by saying, we Rumelians are humans just like you, so please just accept us as your neighbors. We get a glimpse of just the Discante chief's eyes and kind of like his horns, and he says, begin. Maru starts freaking up, he jumps up on the railing and he says, don't be stupid, what the hell are you thinking? Screaming, you! Dabura is it? Somebody slams Maru down and says, shut up or else we're all gonna be killed. The next page, we see Dura lying on the ground bloodied. Then we hear the crowd screaming at Dabura saying, you held back, didn't you? How dare you disrespect such a warrior like Dura? And Dabura just says, I'm sorry. I didn't want to harm his face. Now this is the official translation, like the I didn't want to harm his face. But I low-key liked the leaked translation better, saying I didn't want to harm his third eye. It just seemed more symbolic to me. Anyways, we get a little text blurb at the end of that page that says, we found out later that Dabura and Dura were childhood best friends. And it says, because Dabura hated attention, only Dura really knew how strong he was. Next page, we get Dura laying down and he's being laid to rest in a bed of flowers. We have a flashback to the left, and it's back when Maru and Cross were kids working on the canal with Dura. And they say, you sure say that a lot, Dura. What neighbor, quote unquote? Cross says, yeah, what does that word mean to you anyways? And then Maru says, it means somebody who's next to you. And then Cross says, shut up, I wasn't asking you. Dura says, neighbors are friends that understand why things that matter to you are so important. Then it flashes back to the present, and it's Cross thinking about what Dura said, please accept us as your neighbors, and Cross thinks, I can't do it, Dura, because the most important thing to us was you. While at Dura's funeral and memorial service, the people of the Vermilion are thinking, what's gonna come next? The Discante tribe's gonna come and take all of this land for themselves. Some people are saying, I wish we could fight them. I want to break their horns off and shove them up there. You know what I'm gonna say. Maru asks Jabaloma, he goes, do you think the other tribes were moved by Dura's speech and will send aid to help us? Jabaloma says, the invasion starts tomorrow, so let's not get our hopes up. Then we hear someone say, why have you come here? And everybody turns to look, and Dabura begins walking up. He just says, Dura told me he left something to you. And Dabura leads him over to where all those rocks were, that when Dura had Cross and Maru helping him build the canal, said, don't touch those rocks over there. And all of the Vermilions are like, wait, all of that is mole? Cross begins realizing, wait, so when he told us not to touch those, while he was digging the canal, he put all of the mole over there and separated it from the regular rock? Everybody's just in shock, why didn't he tell us? Then we get a flashback to Dura walking with Maru and Cross as they were kids. Dura says, you want to know why I'm doing this? Maru and Cross say, no, we get why you're doing it, but we want to know what gave you this idea in the first place. And this is referring to them building the canal. He says, cities and villages were all built on the ideals of somebody long ago. And one day when I'm dead and gone, this canal will remain. Adding on, then one day someone else will come along and build something to help Rumel even more. And that cycle could make us all become one. Don't you think that's amazing? Then it flashes us back to the present. Maru starts touching the mole and he says, it's not all just a waste, like the canal. This is the path forward left to the Vermilions by Dura. Maru begins emanating a bunch of light out of himself. Maru reaches his hand out and grabs Cross's hand, and the village people start looking on at him saying, Maru and Cross's Rololuka. And all of the mole around them starts emanating and floating into the air. Jabaloma says, it can't be. This is something with even greater purity than mole. Maru begins talking to everybody and he says, let's go search together, everyone, for a place where we can live safely. People start giving pushback saying a place like that doesn't exist. Maru says, sure it does. There must be a place where there's people living like us. And I'm sure we'll find it if we leave Samaria. People keep giving a little more pushback saying, leave Samaria? Leave the planet? Dabura steps forward and he says, I'll go with. I promised Dura that I would protect the Vermilions. Maru points to the sky and says, let's go. Let's go far beyond the sky to find our neighbors. That is where our chapter ends. Such an amazing chapter, you guys, and also we got such an amazing parallel from Dura, it just reminds you of Gojo. He went into this battle remaining confident, knowing that he was going to die, but he knew that in the long run, this was going to set up his friends and his family, the people he loved, with a better runway for the future. Maybe I'm just reaching there, but let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments. Also, if you made it this far in the video, comment Gojo back so I know you watched the video this far. Peace.